Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I firstly thank you all for coming along here and taking the effort to support us doing this. This is something that we actually had planned pre-COVID, and we've been invited to several LACU's branches and a couple of yes, and then the COVID struck and we never got around to it. So we're very much doing an SS enterprise here, and we'll play it by ear and hopefully nothing will go wrong or too wrong. But every week we do a show and we choose the topics that we think that you might want to hear. So this really is about you telling us and asking the questions that you want to answer. So this is really your thing. And of course I'm joined by all the regulars. You can see we've got Eva Comrie here, who's here. But not only is a great nationalist, but she's also our qualified lawyer. And then we've got Sarah, our academic and constitutional expert. I'll come back to him. We've got Yvonne Ridley, who is a journalist extraordinaire who's worked for some of in fact, all of the largest newspapers in the UK. And Virginia's another expert. And of course we've got Tommy, probably one of the greatest campaigners in Scottish political history. And my good buddy Phil Boswell, ex-MP, oil and gas man. And I'm just here for the eye candy, that's like. So we'll get started. So Hazel, where's Hazel? Hazel will go on. When you've got a question, just stick up your hand. Hazel will come to you, and we'll hear your question and we'll answer it. We've got one question in, and it's for Tommy, first one. And we want to know if you think Celtic should go with 3 centre halves next week.
He's no rising in the debate. He's no rising in the debate, man.
You should see some of the stuff he sends me, believe me. Right, who's first for a question? Who's got a question they want to ask? Because if no one's got a question, we're screwed. Ian. Right, here we go, Ian. Wait till you get the microphone, mate.
Did the new king do us a favour with his mentioned the claim of right in his proclamation?
Well, it's certainly funny you should ask. Sarah's actually going to probably give you all some great news just now on the claim of right, etc.
What's it, this one?
This one okay?
That was not for recording.
Oh, is that recording? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, he absolutely did. The original oath that had to be taken to the claim to uphold the claim of right. Right, I'm not very good with these things. There?
Yeah.
Don't spit in. So what you heard him say was that he was going to uphold the Protestant religion, but you can't take a wee bit of a document and just uphold that bit. And going way back to the time when the very first king had to take an oath to uphold that was William III. He was then made to honour the Scots' right to protest under the claim of right 10 years after he took that oath. So we know it wasn't ever just about the religion. But this is
not true.
Okay. However, it turns out that because there are two crowns, the English crown and the Scottish crown, and the Scottish crown doesn't mean the same as it does in England. It means the crown is the sovereignty that's vested in the nation and not just one person, not just one monarch. And for that reason, Scotland is only in a political union. It's not in a territorial union. So the king having to take an oath to uphold his Scottish kingdom. Okay. That reflects a constitutional difference. So you saw him taking this oath, and he had to up, the Scottish one, it's a Scottish crown, separate from the English crown. Right. So we're in a political union, but because of the crown, and because the crown is vested in the people of Scotland, we remain a sovereign territorial nation. And what that means is that when they talk about crown holdings and the crown estates, they mean what we own. So our resources in Scotland, the oil, the gas, the coal, the water, because of the separation of the crowns and the fact that constitutionally that means the nation, they actually belong to the Scots. They So seeing that those two constitutional arrangements are so separate, Crown and Scotland, and what that means in Scotland was really important, because it now means we can explain that to people. You own, see that oil, that gas, you own it. What they're doing with it is, there's been questions about why they've given the leases out so cheaply and why they pay so little tax, and that by the time they've got funding to get the extraction going, on paper they look like they're making a loss, but we all see how much profit the companies are making. Well, what I'm told, and what we still have to investigate, is I'm told that how they get, what they're doing is, that means there's nothing that's due to the people that own it, the stakeholders. They're getting the back end, so they buy shares in the companies and they get the share profit.
Stealing.
So they're stealing it. They're stealing it from the people of Scotland. They're defrauding us, and they're impoverishing us with what we own. And that is absolutely unlawful by any international law. So that actually, it's all part of when you saw Charles become monarch and take that oath to uphold the claim of right, and as the Crown in Scotland, which actually doesn't mean just him, it means the whole nation.
Thank you, Roddy. I'd like to read you the words of Alex Salmond in relation to the claim of right. This is from a couple of tweets that he did very shortly after King Charles swore. And what Alex said is, the claim of right is properly seen as part of a golden thread of Scottish constitutional thought, stretching from the Declaration of Arbroath of 1320 to the present day. And that thought is that government is contractual and the people, or the community of the realm, are ultimately sovereign. And in any event, it can hardly be argued that the claim of right is merely historical curiosity, when one of the first acts of the new king is to be required to swear an oath to uphold it. This is the sort of history which can shape the future, and my friends, we know it will.
Just on that, we know that our opponents, they don't fight clean, and they will play up that the oath he made was just to uphold the Protestant religion, and they will try to divide and rule. But when they say that, you now know, you've got the counter argument. Not true. It's for everything.
Yeah, I have a question for Sarah. Is there a question here of reparations for what's been taken from the people for the last 50, 60 years?
Keep it short.
Well, the thing is that if you are a sovereign territorial nation, nobody has a right to the resources that are owned by the people. Nobody. So Westminster England has as much right to our oil, our gas, our wind and our water as they do to Norway's or France's or anybody else's. But they've been taking it, and they've been calling it pooling the resources. They don't have any right to do that. And the really good thing is, so Tommy was asking the question, the big question is going to be, how do we do this? But as a sovereign territorial nation, whether we're sovereign politically or not, we can ask, we can go and say, look, these are ours, and we've had no benefit from them. In fact, we're being impoverished by them. And there is no international law in the world that would recognise that as being legitimate. There are other nations who are sovereign territorial nations, including, for instance, Native American nations, who have got reparations, because that belongs to the people of that territorial nation. And we're in exactly the same boat. So absolutely, my dream is to see every single family in Scotland getting a cheque for 10 grand.
We wouldn't spend it right away.
Next question.
Right, next question.
Although it's not so much a question, it's about the rights of Scotland getting the money back for the oil that has been taken from Scotland. There was a Geneva Convention, I think it was 1978, 1982. Britain was one of the countries that settled on it. It was about reparation for countries that have stolen their oil. It was never ratified, but there is a treaty there that sort of suggests that it should really be negotiated. But that is there in black and white, and Britain did sit on it, if anybody's interested. So it's the Geneva Convention, 1978, 1982, I think it was.
Okay. Right.
If we're going for reparations, we better get in before India. That's all I'm saying. Right. There we go. There's a question there. Hazel.
Will be good.
Hello.
Hey, Alison.
I'm probably going to blast out this microphone, so I'll be all mellow about it. Okay? As I've watched the people at the table talk on Prism a lot, it's the only moment of the week where I actually get a single minute of sanity. So I want to acknowledge that, because it doesn't get acknowledged. Okay? And now I'm going to be a Coatbridge woman and speak my mind. It's called charm. I believe the First Minister used to do it, and then she became the First Minister and decided she didn't need it anymore. Give me one moment. I don't want to miss out a word of what I've written. Actually, it won't be long, I promise you. And it will matter. I hope. Okay. Over the since the Queen died, or they admitted and acknowledged her death, in order to promote the royal family and their Charles and their not royal family for me. However, I have grown extremely aggrieved, nice word. I've grown extremely aggrieved over the last while of listening to Scottish leaders speak for me, when in fact they're only speaking for themselves. So rather than look towards Nicola Sturgeon or anyone else, okay, I choose to look towards James Connolly, both as a woman, okay, because it was James Connolly who said that the capitalist worker is the slave of capitalism, whereas the woman is the slave of the slaves. Now, clearly, women can be men, can be cats, can be animals, okay? And I am not allowed to protest because that makes me a bigot. However, I'm ready to have the title of bigot. It's one I've worn repeatedly throughout my adult life in Scotland. So if you give me a moment, I would just like to read you the words of James Connolly. Fellow workers, as you are aware from reading the daily and weekly newspapers, we are about to be blessed with a visit from their king. Knowing from previous experience of royal visits, as well as from coronation orgies, I'll leave that word. Actually, I don't even want to see this image in my head. Orgies, no, please no. And the occasion will be utilised to make propaganda on behalf of royalty and the aristocracy against the forces of democracy and national freedom. I desire to place before you some reasons why we should unanimously and categorically refuse to countenance the British royal family. Yes. So we begin by failing to recognise it, its presences, its institutions, and its parades of all kinds. I appeal to you as workers speaking to workers, whether your work be that of the hand or the brain. I am speaking to you because I wish to safeguard and foster the health of the children of our nation. The future of the working class requires that all political and social positions be open to all men and women, and that all privileges of birth and wealth be abolished, and that every man or woman born into this land should have equal opportunity to attain the proudest position of the land. The socialist and I demand that the only birthright necessary to qualify for public office is the common birthright of our humanity. Believing as I do, there is nothing more sacred. I know it's long, I'm sorry, but it is James Conlon. Believing that there is nothing on earth more sacred than humanity, I deny all and any allegiance to the institution of royalty, and hence I regard any visits of monarchy to Scotland as adding fresh fuel to the fire of hatred, which we regard the plundering institutions of which he and his family are a representative of. Let the capitalist and the landlord class flock to him to exalt him. He is theirs. In them they see the embodiment of their caste and their class. They glorify him and they exalt him. I'm going to cut a bit out. Does anyone know? The mind accustomed to political kings can easily be reconciled to social kings, capitalist kings of every workplace. Thus, the coronation and king's visits are, by our astute, never-sleeping masters, made into huge imperialist propaganda campaigns in favour of political and social schemes against our democracy. But if these leaders and masters are sleepless in their schemes against us, so we, rebels against their rules, must never sleep in our appeal to our fellows to maintain as publicly as we wish our belief in the sovereignty of working class people. I offer one more word to you from Joseph Brennan, the fearless patriot of 48. The world will maintain the divine right of labour to be first in all earthly things, that the thinker and the worker are manhood's only kings. Thank you.
I think it's only proper that our Prism's own Nicholas Witchell replies to that.
Thanks very much, Roddy. I think all of us have to understand that we build in our hearts a vision of a better Scotland. That's why we're involved in the independence movement, and I'm always reminded of the RMT banner that used to hang above Bob Crow's desk when he was the president before he sadly passed away. And that banner read, "The past we inherit, the future we build." And I think that a lot of the talk that we've been involved in today, it's fantastic to have the history on our side. It's fantastic the work that has been done to talk about the claim of right and talk about how it still resounds. It's never been rescinded. The political union in no way, shape or form overturned it. But then we have to realise that when we're involved in the movement, many others are involved in trying to just get on with life and struggle to make ends meet. And the truth is, they don't have time to read about these things. They don't understand all of the machinations of kings and queens. And the truth for me is, I don't find it comfortable talking about past loyalties to past royalties and Scottish royalties compared to English royalties, because I don't want any royalty. I want us. I want us to promote the idea of a very modern democratic republic, where everyone is equal and everyone has got a life chance. That means they can realise their potential, because all of us know that the children of Scotland have got life chances determined about the area that they are born in and the family that they're born to, rather than their own personal talent, which is wrong. We need to build a Scotland that brings out the best in every single child. because that's the type of Scotland that we all want to bring our children into and our grandchildren into. So all I would say, Roddy, is that what's going on just now, the circus that's going on just now, this forced mourning, it is akin to a dictatorship. There's no doubt in my mind it's akin to a dictatorship. It makes me very worried about the power of the British establishment and how they are trying to use the death of a monarch to try and shore up their establishment, shore up everything that they stand for. Personally, I think it will be a false dawn, because I don't think the monarchy has anything like the support that they think that it has, and I certainly believe the situation in Wales the other day, the situation in Scotland over this next few months will show that there is one thing absolutely certain, and that is that there is no united kingdom.
Oh yeah.
There is a very divided state among the four nations that make up the United Kingdom, and the only future I can see, and particularly given the situation with our young people who already are overwhelmingly for Scotland's independence, the only future I can see is of self-determined nations: Wales, England and Ireland. Ireland will, in my opinion, in the very near future, be returned to the one island of Ireland. And I very much hope that we can be part of that, and perhaps to bring the comments right back round to the start, let's always remember that's what James Connolly stood for. James Connolly, a canny Scot, a very brave and courageous and intelligent Scot, someone who believed fundamentally that building socialism required the unity of the nation of Ireland first. I think building socialism in Scotland requires us realising our independence first. Then we can build a socialist Scotland.
Since the Queen died, we have been, or there have been attempts by the media and the establishment to groom us into some form of mass hysteria and mourning, and to make it easy for us then to accept this new king. And the reality is, when she first came to the throne in 1953, there were more than 100 monarchies in the world. Now there are less than 50. And we are heading in the right direction. And although I'm preaching to the converted here, we really need to get the message out that there is going to be an attempt to mass groom the British population, especially in Scotland. Every newspaper that I'm reading, they're pushing how much loved Scotland is by the royal family. They keep, if they had any respect at all for Scotland, if they had any love at all for the people in this great nation, they would have got rid of that ridiculous title that the paedophile Prince Andrew. Of Inverness. The people in Inverness must be up in arms about that. We don't need a monarchy. It's an outdated, outmoded institution. I've got nothing personally against the Windsors. I just don't think that we need them in the 21st century. So let's make Elizabeth the last.
It was appropriate when you started that with saying they're grooming us. I just thought, you know.
Nice, good women for the Borgies.
Right, have we any more questions, or we're all going home and getting on the bevy? All right, here.
Gentlemen,
Over there.
in the grey.
Over here. Over here.
Oh.
Some of you might remember when oil was, in brackets, discovered in 1968. Aberdeen Council, in conjunction with the establishment of the 400-mile limit, put council tax or rates on the oil installations. Within days, the English government quickly rescinded that. I don't think they have the legality to do that. So the oil rigs of Aberdeen were actually the responsibility of Aberdeen Council or Aberdeenshire Council, and that's something that reparations will fulfil and get back. Does anyone remember that quickly? Put through within days.
Yeah, sorry, I was contracts manager for BP and Shell and some of the largest oil and gas projects in the world, with subsea projects. And what you're talking about, what actually governs the ownership? Sarah's already spoken articulately about it. And what she said was that we, the people, own it. And these rules are governed by institutions. And these institutions are controlled, sadly, not by the people, but by those who would keep us on our knees. And the real important rules is UNCLOS, the United Nations Constitution on the Law of the Sea, which defines that the ownership of any of the reserves that lie within the 200-kilometre boundary, or any, before you get into international waters, belong to that sovereign nation. And we, as sovereign Scots, own the oil and gas. We actually own it. They're only licensed out. So in terms of reparation, I, like most of my colleagues here, don't look to the past. We look to the past for lessons learned, and lessons we should have learned, and lessons we should not forget, such as the theft and the impoverishment of our people. Going forward, UNCLOS is very simple. There's an argument that's classically thrown. A lot of the projects I'm doing are west of Shetland, okay? Deep water, 1,000 metre, 2,000 metre. And we're talking about Clare Ridge, Quad 204. I was contracts lead subsea on that. My budget was 1.7 billion on a 5 billion project. Our profit was 30 million a day for 35 years. Do you see that in Coatbridge? Why do I keep coming back to Coatbridge? Is it the town centre? It's the people. It's the people. It's always the people. That's what brings us back. That's what keeps us going. That's what gives us the passion that we believe in. We're not materialists, but we don't like getting stolen from, and that's what's happening right now.
I don't know if any of you here will have remembered the 784 Theatre Company and Cheviot Stag and that.
Yeah.
Why was it called 784 Theatre Company?
7%.
Absolutely, 7% of the population owned 84% of the wealth. Now, that was the position in the 70s. Do you really think it's any different now in 2022?
Thanks, Ross.
I do my homework before I go to an event like this, so I had a wee read of Wikipedia today in relation to Coatbridge and its history. And obviously, 100, 200 years ago, Coatbridge was a thriving industrial heartland of Scotland with big industries and, immigrants, obviously, from Ireland primarily, but a hard-working workforce of men and women. And it has gone from being an industrial heartland to an industrial wasteland on the watch of those who were elected from here of one party or another, all of whom, with a very few notable exceptions, went down there to settle down, no up. And so the importance of the oil industry and the wind and the reverse auction that the Scottish Government were responsible for holding recently, when they put a maximum price on the bids for the wind as opposed to a minimum. the lesson for all of us there is this. Politicians must be held to account, because otherwise it ends like this. And we works it out. You can't plan your future until you learn from your past. Will be as of nothing, unless the politicians elected to deliver independence fulfil their promise, which was, firstly, to hold a constitutional convention. We heard that in January 2020 from our First Minister. She has to be reminded about it, but she could set that up tomorrow if there were a political will. There is also the political will of we, the people, to make sure that on a daily basis we remind all of those around us of the painful reality of life in Scotland today for far too many. Look at the front page of the Herald, as Tommy referred to those who cannot bear the time or the energy or the inclination to consider politics and its machinations. The front page of the Herald today, the top half, headline, is about mothers surviving on the leftovers on the plates of their bairns because they can't feed themselves. And if you read further into the article, you read about a woman who's losing weight because she can't eat. She can't buy herself new clothes that'll fit her. She can't afford to buy a belt. And she's hurting her trousers up with an elastic band for her hair. Is that the Scotland that we have? That is the Scotland that will only deteriorate further unless and until we are an independent country where our resources are for all of us, not retained by the privileged few who rip their neck out of us on a daily basis. I know that Lancashire, like Coatbridge, there are pockets of plenty, and there are some people who would consider themselves, in inverted commas, comfortable. Those people will not remain comfortable because interest rates will continue to rise. Inflation, which is in double figures, is only going one way. Now, those are the people who are comfortable who are going to be suffering when the gas and the electricity bills are followed by the other bills that will continue to increase. But beneath that structure, what you will find in every part of Scotland, there are no exceptions. There will be children and mothers and single working poor living in poverty, and the statistics in Clackmannanshire are the same as here in North Lanarkshire. 25 to 40% of people live in poverty in a country which is a net exporter of energy, where we have the Scottish crown, and we've just seen the spectacle of the English crown adorned with diamonds worth millions stolen from across the globe. Now, are we seriously contending that any of that show has any place in a modern world when you can walk out the front door, walk a couple of hundred yards into town, and you will see people suffering the impact of poverty on a daily basis? Hunger, fear, the inability to turn on the tap, the inability to turn on the electricity, the worry about what bills there are going to be, followed by those who are addicted to alcohol or to drugs, because at times in life that's all there is when there is no hope. So we can look at our history and we can say what Scotland needs, but by God, Scotland has never needed independence more than it needs it today.
I think you can see why these are the people I have on every week. Right, we got another question.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Fear to ask it. To the panel and to the room, it's a very topical question. October 2023, happening or not happening?
Well. Yeah, let's get the controversial one in right away. Now, Tommy's walking out here with his T-shirt, free in 23, so I think it's only right, Tommy, you answer this one first, my friend.
Yep. Thanks very much for the question. I think we have to ask ourselves over the years since the first referendum, what's happened in politics And I think what's happened in politics is there has been a seismic shift. The country of Scotland that used to weigh the Labour vote is now quite clearly a country that electorally votes for the principal party of independence, which is the SNP. If you consider prior to the referendum of 2014, of the 59 MPs, over 40 of them were Labour MPs. In 2015, they had one. And today, after the latest general election of 2019, they've still only got one. So the Labour Party has, like snow off a dike, lost its support because it's wrapped itself in unionism. It's wrapped itself in the Union Jack. And it's put, the Labour Party has put the defence of the British Union before socialism. Now, some people would argue it was never for socialism. But the truth is, they are now nothing other than red Tories. Nothing other than red Tories. The SNP, on the other hand, they said in 2015 that people should vote for them because they believed in independence. And many people at this table and probably in the room were members of the SNP and campaigned for the SNP. I've never been in the SNP, but as a socialist, I felt after the lesson of 14, were the Unionists united around no? I felt as a socialist it was my duty to argue that we should unite the yes movement around the SNP. So I called for people to vote SNP, even though I was a socialist, and the SNP is not a socialist party. I thought it was the right thing to do because the cause is always bigger than the party. And what happened was there was an absolute tsunami, as you know, of the 59 MPs elected. 56 of them came from the Party of Independence. And in truth, if you remember, what you call them, down in Dumfries, we should have had 58 if the Greens hadn't been so sectarian and stood and gave that muppet the chance to win in that particular seat. So we could have 58 out of, we should have 57 out of the 59. The problem is, since then, the SNP appears, and I'm sorry, this isn't meant to be an anti-SNP position, but the truth is the SNP seems to have done everything else other than pursue independence. That's what they said. You can go and look at the quotes prior to 16 and the Brexit vote. We will not be dragged out of the European Union against our will. We will. That was a statement. That was a statement from Ian Blackford several times in the British Parliament. And I'm sorry, but it was nonsense. The SNP, after the Brexit vote, spent most of their time saying they were going to reverse Brexit rather than promote independence. And that was the difficulty. They were going to try and overturn a vote, a democratic vote of the English people. And by the way, if I was in England at the time and I had voted for Brexit, I would have been pissed off that people in Scotland were saying, we're going to overturn your vote. There's no right to campaign around the idea of reversing a vote that the people of England had taken. Whether it's right or wrong, we can have a discussion about, but they voted for it in an open ballot. And what they've done since, in my opinion, is they have raised the prospect. They have said next year, but they've never given us a date. And I think the movement was gotten so upset and pissed off that the SNP leadership have now been forced in to giving us a date.
The bill has been published. The Scottish Parliament bill has been published. The referendum bill states categorically, 19th October 2023, there's going to be an independence referendum. Some people here will say, oh, Tommy, surely you're not taken in by that. Surely you don't think that they sincerely mean it. Well, I'm going to say to you, brothers and sisters, it doesn't really matter what I think or even what you think. I think the majority of the people of Scotland believe that that is a legitimate date. And as far as I'm concerned, the SNP should not be allowed to drop that date. We need to assemble. We need to assemble in Edinburgh on the 1st of October. We need to march in Edinburgh. We need to assemble in Glasgow on the 8th of October at the Festival. And our statement should be loud and it should be clear. And that is when the Supreme Court judges meet on the 11th and the 12th of October in London. We're saying already, we don't care what an unelected judge says, we don't care what an unrepresentative Tory says. What we're saying is we have the right to vote and we will vote next year on our freedom. That's all it's to say.
And Tommy says that they were kind of forced into it, and I know there's a lot of ALBA members here, and I have to make a declaration, being one myself. But you take the credit. Maybe a lot of you thought that we didn't do enough at the elections. We did enough to make the SNP do this. Yeah. That was what got them moving, and Tommy's right. We've got to hold the feet to the fire. Yes. And we mustn't stop.